Hey Reddit, throwaway because, well, obvious reasons. This is a story I've never told anyone in full, and I'm not proud of it, but here goes. My name's William, and over the years, I've done things I can't take back. The one I'm about to tell you is the one that still keeps me awake sometimes. It all started with crypto. Early 2017, Bitcoin and Ethereum were blowing up, and I had this obsession, I guess, with the idea of money that exists only as numbers. I wasn't a genius hacker or anything, just a guy who knew a little too much about wallets, private keys, and how poorly most people protect their digital assets. I stumbled across this concept of ghost wallets, crypto wallets that technically exist, can hold millions, but they're ghost accounts. Untraceable, unverifiable, basically a digital mirage. And then it hit me, what if I could convince anyone, that I owned one of these wallets? That I had millions, just sitting there, untouchable, invisible, and that I could lend it or invest it for them? At first, it was just an experiment, a thought exercise. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it could actually work. People wanted in on crypto so badly they'd believe anything, and greed makes people blind. I wasn't hurting anyone, right? At least, that's what I told myself. Anyway, this story is going to be long, because the setup, the prep, the moment of truth, it all mattered. And yeah, there were consequences I never saw coming. Once I decided to actually do it, the planning became almost addictive. I spent weeks reading everything I could about cryptocurrency, wallets, blockchain explorers, and people's naive obsession with hidden riches. I needed a wallet that looked real but had no traceable funds, a ghost in the system. So I created a few test wallets, transferred tiny fractions of Bitcoin back and forth, just to understand how transactions appeared on the blockchain. I wanted it to feel tangible, like it really existed. Next, I studied human psychology, greed, fear of missing out, the way people react to exclusive opportunities. I made a fake portfolio of screenshots showing balances in the millions. Each number, each decimal, was deliberately crafted to look plausible. I even set up a burner email, a professional-looking LinkedIn profile, and a chat persona to verify my identity. Every tiny detail mattered. By the end, I felt like I had built a little kingdom of smoke and mirrors, a world where millions existed, only because I said they did. The first real step wasn't hacking anything or moving money. It was a conversation. Funny how most crimes start that way. A friend of a friend introduced me to Daniel at a small bar after work. Daniel was exactly the type of person I'd imagined while planning this whole thing, smart enough to understand crypto, but not experienced enough to question everything. We talked for nearly 2 hours. At first it was normal stuff, markets, investments, the usual complaints about missing Bitcoin when it was cheap. Then I casually mentioned that I'd gotten lucky years ago with an early wallet. I said I hadn't touched it in ages. His eyes changed immediately. I didn't brag. That would have ruined it. Instead, I acted hesitant, like I didn't trust people with the information. That's the trick, make them convince you. Eventually, I showed him one of the screenshots on my phone. A wallet balance with numbers that looked almost unreal. Daniel just stared and whispered, "Dude, that's millions." The moment Daniel said that, I knew the hook had landed. I shrugged like it wasn't a big deal, even though my heart was pounding. I told him the wallet was complicated. Old keys, old software, stuff that made it hard to access directly. That part was half true, old wallets can be messy, which made the lie feel more believable. Daniel started asking questions immediately. Could it be moved? Could it be invested? Was it all Bitcoin? I answered slowly, like someone who didn't want attention. I explained that technically the funds existed on the blockchain, but accessing them required some recovery steps. That's when I floated the idea. If someone helped me set up a secure transfer structure, we could move a portion of it into active investments. I didn't ask for money right away. That would have looked desperate. Instead, I let him suggest it himself. And he did. Daniel leaned forward, lowering his voice like we were discussing a bank robbery. "If I helped you set it up, we could both make serious money." After that night, things moved faster than I expected. Daniel texted me the very next morning like we just discovered buried treasure. Part of me thought he'd wake up and realize how ridiculous the whole thing sounded. But instead, he doubled down. That meant I had to make the illusion stronger. I spent the next few days building what I called the proof. I created a detailed document explaining the so-called recovery process for the wallet. It was packed with technical jargon, references to legacy key formats, cold storage migration, transaction batching. Most of it sounded complicated enough to discourage too many questions. I also generated a public wallet address and staged tiny transactions between several wallets I controlled. On a blockchain explorer, it looked active, mysterious, almost important. Then I sent Daniel a link and said, "This is the wallet." He stared at the transaction history like it was a treasure map. That's when he asked the question that told me the crime had officially started. "How much do you need to unlock it?" When Daniel asked that, I pretended to hesitate. I even told him maybe we should forget the whole thing. That was deliberate. People trust reluctance more than confidence. Eventually I told him the story I'd prepared. I said the wallet used an old recovery system tied to an outdated service provider. According to my research, the coins could technically be moved, but first we had to process a verification transaction and pay a migration fee. I made it sound annoying rather than impossible. "About 40,000, I said quietly, like I hated even mentioning it. Daniel didn't react the way I expected. I thought he'd laugh or walk away. Instead, he leaned back and started calculating something in his head. "If the wallet really has what you showed me," he said slowly, 40 grand is nothing." That's when the reality hit me. This wasn't theory anymore. 2 days later he called and said he'd arranged the money. And suddenly I had a real problem. Because now I actually had to go through with it. The transfer happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Daniel insisted on doing everything properly, which meant sitting together with laptops open like we were running a legitimate financial operation. We met at his apartment, and I remember noticing how normal everything looked: coffee mugs on the table, sunlight through the window, his dog wandering around the room. It almost made me forget what I was about to do. I walked him through the fake process step by step. First the verification wallet, then the migration fee address. Everything looked technical enough that Daniel didn't question it. When he finally sent the 40,000, we both watched the transaction confirmation appear on the blockchain explorer. He smiled like a kid who just bought a winning lottery ticket. "Step 1, he said. I nodded, pretending to focus on the screen while adrenaline flooded my chest. The coins had already moved through 3 wallets I controlled. Daniel thought we were unlocking millions. I knew the money was already gone. For about 12 hours, everything felt perfect. I moved Daniel's money through the chain of wallets exactly the way I'd planned, splitting it, routing it, letting it dissolve into the noise of thousands of other transactions. Watching it scatter across the blockchain gave me a weird sense of power. Digital smoke. Gone. But the next morning, Daniel called earlier than I expected. "Hey, the wallet balance still hasn't changed." My stomach dropped even though I'd rehearsed this moment. I told him migrations like this could take time, especially with legacy wallets. Network congestion, verification cycles, things like that. I threw technical terms at him until the explanation sounded complicated enough to be believable. He accepted it, mostly. But then he asked if we could meet again that evening and check everything together. That wasn't part of the plan. Because the longer he stared at the blockchain, the higher the chance he'd notice something strange, like the fact that the migration wallet had already emptied itself completely. I almost canceled the meeting. For a couple of hours I seriously considered disappearing altogether. New number, new accounts, just vanish. 40,000 wasn't life-changing money, but it was enough to make things messy if Daniel started asking the wrong people the wrong questions. But disappearing that fast would have confirmed everything. So I went. That evening we sat at the same kitchen table, laptops open again. Daniel had already pulled up the wallet on the blockchain explorer. I could see the confusion on his face before he even spoke. "Something's weird," he said. My pulse started hammering in my ears. He pointed at the screen. The transaction we sent yesterday was visible, but the funds had already moved through several other addresses. Too quickly. Faster than the migration process I'd described. I leaned closer, pretending to study it. Then I did the only thing I could think of. I blamed the system. "Yeah, that's actually normal," I said slowly. "They route it through intermediary wallets first." Daniel didn't look convinced. He kept refreshing the blockchain explorer, zooming into each transaction like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Every click made my chest tighten. I realized something I hadn't fully considered before. Daniel wasn't stupid. Curious people are dangerous when they think their money is involved. "So these addresses, they're part of the recovery service?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Think of it like routing nodes." He leaned back, arms crossed. For a moment the room was completely silent except for the dog walking across the floor. Then he sighed. "Okay," he said. "I guess this stuff is more complicated than I thought." Relief hit me so hard it almost made me dizzy. But then he added something that froze me again. "My cousin works in blockchain security. Maybe I'll show him the transactions just to understand how it works." I forced a laugh. Inside my head, alarms were screaming. That night, after I left Daniel's apartment, I felt something I hadn't expected: panic. My chest was tight, my hands shook slightly, and I kept replaying every detail. Every lie, every fake screenshot, every word I'd said to make it believable. The adrenaline rush I'd felt while taking the money was gone, replaced by this gnawing fear that I'd miscalculated. For the first time, the thrill wasn't fun, it was terrifying. I realized how close I'd come to getting caught simply because I underestimated curiosity and greed combined. Every notification ping on my phone made my stomach lurch. Each time I thought about Daniel showing the blockchain activity to his cousin, I felt trapped in my own trap. Guilt started creeping in too. I kept thinking, these were real people with real money. 40,000 wasn't chump change. I'd convinced him to hand it over with nothing backing it up. And even though the system made it anonymous, part of me felt like I'd personally violated him. By the time I went to bed, sleep was impossible. The next few days were a nightmare of constant anxiety. Every time my phone buzzed, I flinched, expecting Daniel or someone else to call with questions. Even seeing a notification from a crypto forum triggered a tiny panic attack. I started double-checking all my wallets, making sure nothing linked back to me. It became an obsession: every address, every transaction, every digital footprint. I felt trapped inside my own creation. I also felt strangely hollow. The rush of the con was gone, replaced by this creeping realization that I'd crossed the line. It wasn't just money. I had manipulated someone's trust, exploited greed, and for what? A digital thrill? 40,000? Not even enough to brag about. Sleep came in short, restless bursts, filled with dreams where Daniel discovered the truth, called the authorities, or somehow traced everything back to me. Each morning I woke up with my heart racing. I realized something fundamental: adrenaline and guilt are a terrible cocktail, and I was drinking it in gallons. It made me question who I was and what I was becoming. A week later, Daniel never called back about the cousin or the wallet. I don't know if he gave up, got distracted, or just accepted the explanations I fed him. Either way, the immediate danger had passed. I still couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted. Every email, every notification felt like it could be him checking up on me. In a strange way, getting away with it made the experience heavier, not lighter. I had the money, yes, but it didn't feel like victory. Instead, it felt like carrying a secret too big for anyone to know. I couldn't celebrate or brag. I couldn't tell anyone. Even friends who casually asked about crypto made me flinch. It changed how I saw myself. The guy who had once imagined himself as clever suddenly realized how reckless and morally bankrupt he'd been. The adrenaline of the con faded, leaving only guilt and a nagging sense that I had stepped into a world where the rules didn't apply to me, but the consequences still could. It was a lonely victory. After that, I made a conscious effort to avoid Daniel and anyone connected to him. I changed email addresses, deleted social media accounts, even started using a VPN consistently. I told myself it was just caution, but really it was paranoia, the kind that stays with you long after the crime is done. Every time I logged into my wallets, I felt that same tightness in my chest, a reminder that the money I had wasn't really mine in any moral sense. I also started reflecting on why I did it. Was it greed? The thrill? The ego boost of outsmarting someone? A little of all of it, probably. But I realized that the story of the ghost wallet wasn't just about money or trickery, it was about control. For a brief moment, I held the power to make someone believe in a reality I created out of thin air. That's a dangerous feeling. One I wouldn't wish on anyone. The money changed nothing except my view of myself, clever, yes, but fundamentally compromised. Looking back, I can't say I'm proud of what I did. The ghost wallet scam taught me things I didn't want to know about myself, how easily I could manipulate someone's trust, how thrill and adrenaline can override ethics, and how quickly just a little experiment can spiral into something real with real consequences. $40,000 changed hands, and while no one called the cops, the emotional cost was heavier than the money itself. If there's one thing I'd warn anyone reading this, it's that cleverness isn't the same as wisdom. It's easy to get caught up in the mechanics of a con, the planning, the deception, the adrenaline, and forget the human element. People aren't just numbers on a screen. They're trusting, vulnerable, and in many ways, predictable. Exploiting that may feel exhilarating at the moment, but it leaves scars. I've told this story here because it's cathartic, but also as a warning. If you ever find yourself thinking you can outsmart someone with a perfect plan, remember, the consequences, and the guilt, can last far longer than the thrill ever did.